And you were listening to Season 6 of the award-winning Christian Outdoors podcast with your host, Pete Rogers. And you are listening to Christian Outdoors podcast with John and Pete. And we have with us today, as I said in the introduction, Mr. Chase Carlock, who is a diehard kayak fisherman from the state of Indiana. And we're going to dive into that in just a minute. But before we get into the details of that, Chase, tell us about yourself.
Yeah. So I'm a husband first, and a father of 4 children. And, I'm a follower of God. I was raised in church. So, God has always been first in my life. Now, I won't say that I never strayed from that. There was some times that I ran from the things that I knew I was supposed to do. My grandfather was actually my pastor growing up. So, I always went to church. I was just not always in church.
You had to if your grandfather's the preacher. You got
yes, exactly. Yeah, it wasn't an option. My dad never said, "Hey, you can just not go." I was guaranteed to go. Even when I was out of the house, I was still going to go to church.
And you have to stay awake in church if Grandpa's preaching too, right?
Yeah, guaranteed. He would call you out.
That's right. That's right. I called my kids out once. I really did. I did. They were misbehaving, and their mother was having a time getting them. I just stopped and went down. And I whispered to him in the ear. I covered my microphone up and I whispered, and they straightened right up.
Yeah, my dad played the bass, so I could remember sometimes when I'd be sitting out in the congregation and be like goofing off a little bit, and I could just remember looking up and making eye contact with him, and I was like, "Oh, this is not going to be good." Yeah,
that's right. Of course, when at our age. We had the harp and the lyre when we were playing. We didn't have basses and drums and barely had organs. It was so long ago. So one of the things or the main thing we want to talk about here with Chase today is his passion for kayak fishing. So first, the obvious question is, how did you get into it? And then the next one is why?
So for kayak fishing, so I grew up as an outdoorsman. So I've always loved hunting, fishing. Grew up, really, we did a lot of catfishing more than anything else. Catfish with my dad. We had a spot that we rented on a river, and we would go and set up bank poles and, lines and spend weekends fishing, as much as we could. As I got a little older, I got into crappie fishing, and that's something that, and I know you call them crappie, but I call them crappie.
What's your language? Christian show. Okay, go ahead.
So yeah, I got into crappie fishing and fell in love with that. I've been doing that now for probably 15 or so years, and definitely love to do that. But back in 2020, we had, my company shut down for a short time, and we just, really started refocusing on being outdoors more. Again, four children. Me and my wife were trying to find time to spend more time outdoors. And what a better time than when, the world's being shut down for stuff. So yeah, we started trying to make as much time outdoors as what we could. My wife actually was the first one to go kayaking. And I had honestly, growing up, I was like, there is no way I'm ever going to be in a small plastic boat. It seems like a crazy thing. But then the more I looked into it, I was like, that actually looks like it would be fun. And I really started watching some YouTube videos. She went kayaking and really enjoyed it. Started watching a lot of YouTube videos, and I was like, man, I could turn kayaking into kayak fishing, and that would be a blast for me. It's not just paddling around one of those little plastic boats, but out there catching fish. So yeah, I picked up we went kayaking a few times, rented some kayaks, and then I picked up a fishing kayak early 2021. And okay. Really the rest is history, man. I spent a decent amount of time out on the water that year. And again, I was mostly crappie fishing. I would just go out with an ultralight rod and flip a little crappie jig and get a little bit of everything to bite, and just really enjoyed that. But I continued watching YouTube videos on kayak fishing, and I saw a guy that was doing kayak tournament fishing, and I was like, oh, that looks really cool. I'm a crappie fisherman. I'm not a bass fisherman, you know? So I was like, I'll try to figure out if there's any crappie fishing tournaments that are around me. And I looked everywhere I could, and I'm like, there's just no options. So I seen that we had a few local clubs that do kayak bass tournaments. And I said, well, hey, I guess I need to try to figure out bass fishing. And back in 2023, I fished my first tournament of out of a kayak, and had a ton of fun. I caught one single bass. It was cold. It was early March, or it was mid March, and we had a cold front come in. It was like 34 degrees. It snowed, it rained, and it blew. Wind was terrible all day, and I ended up putting like 8 miles. And I had a paddle kayak. I ended up putting up like 8 miles paddling around trying to catch fish, and I found one single fish, and that was like, from then I was hooked on tournament fishing. It was a blast.
But you just opened the door to a couple of questions I had in the beginning. Explain to a listener the difference in a sit in and sit on kayak for somebody who's just complete novice. We have to assume that the listener don't, you know, a lot of people, when they think of kayak, they think of those that sit in with a little rubber seal around white water rafting, right? The little short ones.
Yeah.
But a fishing kayak is completely different from that. So explain that.
Different. Yeah. So I've been in a few sit-in kayaks. They are generally fairly easy to paddle. And that's what they're mostly made for. They're made for being able to paddle. A lot of them are more recreational style kayaks. So a sit-in, you actually sit inside of it, and it has the shell of the kayak that comes around you. Normally just has a small hole that you climb in through, and you're inside of the kayak. Now they make some that have bulkheads in them. You can put in inflatable bulkheads in them as well. Just so if you have water come into the kayak, it doesn't flood the kayak and sink the kayak. Versus a sit on top, it's actually a completely sealed piece of plastic, and you have air in between the top and bottom layer of the kayak. So you have an internal hole of the kayak. So your seat is actually up on top of them. Most of them use stadium seats nowadays. Now you can get cheap ones that just have a foam pad that sits on the bottom, and sometimes they don't even have a backrest, but normally it's like a plastic backrest, and it'll strap into the sides. But a lot of them have upgraded to having stadium seats, and I mean, some even have swivel seats in them nowadays. So they've gotten very, very advanced. So yeah, sit on top. The nice thing about those, and it was the biggest reason why I decided I want to sit on top from the beginning, is if you ever have a time where you would turn the kayak over, the kayak's still going to float. So you've just got to get it turned back over while you're in the water and get back up in it. Not the easiest thing to do, but it's definitely better than filling the kayak with water and then having to try to find your way to land, especially when you're way out in a lake.
So on your pedal kayak here, Chase, is it like a bicycle that goes in a circle, or is it a push back and forth pedal type kayak?
Yeah, so these are bicycle style pedals, and they have a propeller drive. So most of the ones that are pushed back and forth, they have a fin drive. We went with the prop drives. There are a lot less issues with the prop drives from what I've looked, on research. And the kayaks we got, so I picked up a Bonafide P127, and then my wife has an Old Town 106 PDL. So they are both brands that have very, very bulletproof pedal drives. They have very few issues with their pedal drive system. So we wanted to go with brands that we wouldn't see a lot of issues with that.
Okay. Is the propeller in the middle of the boat or in the back?
In the middle.
Okay. Go ahead.
So there's actually a cutout. There's a cutout in the floor for each of them, and the pedal drive. So you can lift them up anytime that you're in, shallow water, or if you're in a lot of weeds, you can actually pick the pedal drive up. It's pretty simple, method. But yeah, you can pick the pedal drive up, and it sits in the deck of your kayak. And then whenever you're back into deeper water or back out of the weeds, you just drop the pedal drive back down.
Yeah. So have you tangled it in weed yet?
I have, yes. And even though there's really not very many weeds right now, they'll be growing like mad at my local lake pretty soon. But I've had a few times where it's tangled up in weeds and pulled the drive.
Okay. One of the things I ran into in the other episode I did about this was I wish I could think of the dude's name, but he was talking about fishing tournaments, and he was telling me that some of the people in the tournaments have electric motors on their kayaks. So this is my question. The whole reason, in my opinion, or my understanding, that you're kayak fishing is for human power. So it seems to me, as somebody who does not participate in this activity, that if you put an electric motor on it, it's no longer a kayak because it's not human powered. And that would seem to me to like to be an unfair advantage. So do they have rules in some of these tournaments that it's human power only versus an open tournament? Because before long, we're going to start seeing 2 horsepower outboards on the back of these things. And it's no longer a kayak tournament then. It's just a small boat.
I didn't think about that for mine. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are some tournaments will be paddle only. They don't allow electric motors. Most tournaments have gotten to where they do allow electric motors. There is a lot of back and forth in the kayak community about that. Well, hey, is this really a kayak? Even me being so big into kayak fishing, I see all the new kayaks coming out, and there are a lot of kayaks that have came out recently that can hold a ton of weight. They're pretty big. One of them in particular, a lot of people talk about, there's a Bonafide XTR. And if you actually look at this kayak, it's shaped kind of like a bass boat. It has a front platform that you can stand on to fish. And I think it has like 700-pound weight capacity, or it might be 500 pounds, but it's a lot. Has a very high weight capacity.
Wow.
And so a lot of people are saying, well, hey, is this really a kayak? Is it not a kayak? So in my opinion, I really have no issues. Now I'm not a bass master, I'm not a world-class kayak fisherman. I'm not going out there and fishing tournaments for thousands and thousands of dollars. Most of the tournaments, if I pull off a win, it's going to be a couple $100, Yeah. So it's nothing serious. I'm doing
tens of dollars.
What was that?
I'm fishing for tens of dollars.
Yes, exactly. So I'm doing the tournament fishing for the fun of it. And man, I'm going to say there is so much camaraderie in the kayak fishing community. So like I talked about, I came from being a crappie fisherman mainly. And my first couple tournaments, I went out there with my ultralight rod and was just flipping a crappie jig because I knew that was how I could catch fish. And I had my first tournament, I caught a fish. My second tournament, the only fish I caught were crappie. And that tournament, the guy who ended up winning that tournament, I ran into him at the very next tournament. So we fished a series out of the same lake. So the third tournament of the series, I ran into him that morning when I was getting ready and about to go load my kayak into the water. When I ran into him, I was talking to him. I said, hey, you're actually the one that won the last tournament, right? And he said, yeah. He said, I won the last tournament. He talked to me for a little while. He said, hey, if you need help, I'll help you carry your kayak down to the launch. He had a kayak that was on wheels, so he could just roll it right to the ramp and stuff. So he helped me carry my kayak down to the launch. And then he was like, yeah, he's like, I was catching all my fish on a crankbait out here. Now, at that point, I had literally zero faith in a crankbait. I had never caught a fish on a crankbait. I knew every time I throw, treble hook baits, the first thing I do is snag up in weeds. And so the place I fish is called...
Done plenty of that.
Yeah. The place I fish is called Bluegrass Fish and Wildlife Area. And I'm going to say they call it bluegrass because it is full of grass. I mean, there is... Yeah. It's old strip pits, and there is grass everywhere in it. So I'm like, every time I throw a treble hook bait, I just snag right up in weeds. Yeah, so he told me, he's like, hey, I was catching them on a square bill crankbait. So I went out and I got out a square bill and I had it sitting on my center console of my kayak and I had it ready. And about 4 hours into the day, I still hadn't thrown it because, again, I had no confidence in it and hadn't caught a fish. I actually ran into him on the water and he said, "Hey, how's it going out here?" I was like, "It's been a pretty brutal day." And he said, "Yeah," he said, "It's been a little bit tough today, but I've still been catching them." I was like, "Yeah." He said, "Have you tied on a square bill yet?" I said, "No, I haven't." I said, "I have one sitting on my console ready, but I can't get myself to throw it." I said, "I have no confidence in it." And he talked to me for probably 5 to 10 minutes and then pulled away. And as he was pulling away, he said, "Tie on that square bill." So I was like, "Okay, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it and see what happens." And less than 5 casts, I had my first bass.
Oh, wow.
So,
Yeah.
Nice.
Somebody out there competing against me gives me what he's been catching his fish on for the day. And it's a great community. I've done that with multiple people out on the water. Again, competitors on the water, and they're like, "Hey, what are you catching them on?" And here's what I've caught fish on. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. You won't see that on the FLW tour.
No. Yeah. Even and I have buddies that are in bass boats that fish out the same body of water as me, and I get along with them really well. But you see a lot of the bass boat guys, and they don't like the kayakers. I don't really know what it is, but yeah, there's normally some animosity between the bass boats and the kayakers. I get along with everybody, so.
But I think you see that like in every sport. Right? You've got traditional bow,
Yeah,
or compound bow, crossbow. There's just this sense, these purists of their chosen method, right?
Yes.
Rather than celebrating all who partake in it, I think is
Yeah, and your fly fishermen and your conventional fishermen.
Yes, very much so.
A lot, and this is kind of a ugly statement, but you see some fly fishermen who frown upon conventional fishermen.
Yeah.
And conventional fishermen are like, "I don't get it. I don't understand the fly fishing." And even people who fly fish reservoirs, who aren't just fly fishing in streams for trout. I know a lot of people who fly fish for bluegill and for crappie and even bass and stripers here at home. But they just frown upon the people who conventional fish and live bait fishermen versus artificial bait fishermen.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. Very true.
I mean, it's like John said so well. Why can't we all just get along?
Yes.
Well, and I think it speaks to also to, there is a shrinking number of sportsmen, right, in our country. And man, we should be encouraging kids to get out there, whatever method they want. If they want to try fly fishing, they want to, try whatever type of rod they want. I mean, my goodness, get them out there, out there.
Yeah,
absolutely. So Chase, on these tournaments, I'm assuming it's like other fishing tournaments. There's a launch time and a weigh-in time, but
correct.
Traditionally, my understanding with the kayakers is they don't bring the fish back and weigh them in, right?
Correct.
You measure, take pictures and stuff. So explain that part of it.
Correct. So the kayak tournaments are generally catch, photo, release. So you catch the fish, you take a picture of it on a measuring board. Every tournament I've been to has their certain measuring boards they have approved. Really every tournament I've fished has a catch board approved, which is spelled KETCH. That's the brand, and they've been around for a while. They're very reliable boards. The measurements are correct on them, so they approve certain boards. So the way it goes is you take your fish after you catch it. You have to put it on there with the face up against the bump. So the bump is actually the part of the board that sticks up. So you put their lip up against that bump and you hold the mouth closed. If the mouth is open, you actually get deducted penalties by quarter inch increments. So you hold the mouth closed and then you just try to get that tail to touch the furthest 1/4 inch mark as what you can. So the boards, most people fish with a 28-inch board. I actually have a 32-inch board just because I kind of fish for whatever, and I kind of like measuring everything I catch, you know.
Very optimistic there. Very optimistic.
Yeah, I would love to say I could catch a 32-inch bass. That would be a world record. So
Yeah. So it's length only.
length only, correct. So
Okay.
and the way they do it to make sure that you are, so there are some tournaments that are month long, so you have a month to catch your fish. Some tournaments that are, you know, one single day. Some tournaments, like there are statewide tournaments, so you can fish any public water for the state of Indiana, or there are some that are even nationwide tournaments, any public water. And the way they verify that you're actually on public water is you got to give GPS permissions to your camera and GPS permissions to the app that you submit them through. So two of the most common apps that you submit them through are called TourneyX and Fishing Chaos. And I fished some tournaments out of both apps. One of them I fish is called Catch 22. It's one that I signed up for last year, and I'm going to sign up for every year going forward. It's your 22 longest bass for the year. And it's not necessarily a competition against anybody but yourself. You see how many, you know, what your 22 longest fish were last year, and your goal is to try to pass that up this year. And some of the funding to that goes towards veteran suicide awareness. So it's a really cool thing. That's put on by KBF, Kayak Bass Fishing. Chad.
Now, what's the name of that app again?
At Hoover.
Well, sorry, you cut out on me for a moment.
I was going to say I lost you for just a second.
Yeah, what's the name of that app again for our listeners?
So there's Fishing Chaos and TourneyX.
Yep. And TourneyX, and which is the one that the funding goes to support?
Catch 22, CATCH 22.
Okay.
And some of the funding for that one goes towards veteran suicide awareness.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It is.
Now
it's just a fun tournament. There's all kinds of giveaways. Normally every tournament there's some kind of giveaway that they'll throw in there. But again, it's really just the fun of seeing how many big fish you catch for the year, or you know, sometimes how many little fish you catch for the year.
Yeah. Now with the board, back to the board for a moment.
Yeah.
So just for people that aren't into that world, right? So you're holding the face up to the bump. You're trying to hold a camera, and you don't have a fish that's behaving. I mean, what? Is it get difficult at times? I mean,
yeah.
Because I've had fish that they don't want to stay still.
yeah. So, like I said, you know, I watch a lot of YouTube, so I actually have a YouTube channel also, and I have quite a few videos where I'll have fish that flop off the board. I put out a bloopers video the year before last of, you know, losing a bunch of different fish off the board. I actually had one. I fished my championship tournament last year, and I had one that in the middle of measuring it. So I always put at the end of the bump of the board, I always put my net there with the open face of the net. So if a fish jumps off, generally they land in that net. So I had one last year that jumped, and it kind of like jumped sideways and jumped past the net all the way off the side of my kayak. But in my old kayak, I hung my feet over the side, and it was just a stroke of luck. I straight up kicked that fish and kicked it right back into the boat. So before I measured it, it had jumped out, and I kicked that fish straight back in the boat. It was perfect video, you know. I got it on video, made a good short and everything. So I kicked it back in the boat and was able to get the measurement. Now, by the end of the day, it actually didn't matter. I was able to cull that fish out, you know, with a bigger fish. But at the time, I hadn't got my 5 fish limit, so that was like perfect timing getting that fish back in the boat. Because normally, when you're having a tournament and you have something go wrong, that's when you tend to spiral. And once you spiral, then next thing you know, you don't set the hook right on a fish. You don't get a fish landed because you don't net them right, and one thing after another goes wrong.
Man, so you've not done that since? Kicked a fish back in the boat?
I'm telling you, you still have mistakes, especially in a kayak, man. They're small boats. It's so easy for something to go wrong. You just try to look at ways of preventing that to go wrong in a bad way. You
Right,
always try
right.
to look at what are little fixes I can do to keep this from happening again.
Right.
Yeah.
The first couple times I measured fish, I actually measured them up in my lap. So I would have my board sitting on my lap. Well, you're up, 12 inches to 18 inches above the kayak, and a fish can jump anywhere at that point. So I got to where now, my fish are always measured in the floor of the kayak. Now, say I haven't measured fish in the new kayak yet because I haven't caught fish in the new kayak yet. So, yeah, it's been a rough start to my year, which
Yeah.
I haven't fished as much this year as what I had at this point last year. But it's been a rough start to my year. I've had several days where I just haven't caught any fish yet. So, I'm kind of nervous about measuring fish around the pedal drive because it does take up a spot in the middle of your floor of your kayak. So it's something I'll have to get used to. So the best thing I can do is measure fish before a tournament.
Yeah.
Practice,
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was going to ask that. You've already answered the question, is if you're measuring fish and throwing them back, is it just a total number of fish that day, but you're still just a 5 fish, your 5 biggest fish,
Yeah.
right?
So there are certain tournaments that have different regulations. Most of them are a 5 fish limit. I fished a couple that are a 3 fish limit. So yeah, you measure them, you throw them back. Like I said, it uses your GPS coordinates to make sure if you're supposed to be fishing a certain body of water, that you're on that body of water. If you're supposed to be fishing public waters, that you're on public waters. Like one of my local lakes, 2/3 of the lake is public water, but there is a third of the lake that's actually privately owned. So your GPS coordinates will tell if you're in that area that's privately owned, and your fish will get DQ'd.
Yeah. So make sure you put your fish trap, just holding all your fish ahead of time in the public water. And so all 5 fish caught right here when you pull
there
them
was
out of
there was a tournament just over last weekend, and my local club actually just put out the details on it where we had a guy cheat in the tournament. So somebody had noticed in one of his pictures that he had a stringer there, and they were like, well, hey, that's kind of odd normally, because you're supposed to release the fish. They're like, it's kind of odd that he would have a stringer on his boat during this tournament. I mean, if you have bycatch, you can keep crappie, you can keep bluegill, you just can't keep the fish that are required to be in the tournament. So somebody had made a comment about, hey, it's kind of odd that this guy has a stringer, and sent it out to the admins. Well, the admins ended up looking into it, and 4 of the fish he uploaded were the same fish. And they were uploaded at the pictures were taken at different time frames and at different locations on the lake. So they reached out to the guy. He ended up admitting it and said, yeah, he said he caught this fish and he stringered it and then just carried it around the lake and took pictures of it at 4 different times throughout the day. And
it's amazing.
I just don't understand it.
$200,
Yeah, we had those. What was that last year? Those guys were putting lead weights in fish, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that happened multiple times. I mean, that's crazy.
Agreed. I don't get it when you're talking about thousands of dollars in a tournament. I don't understand why you would do that. But when you're talking about a couple $100 at the most, and this guy didn't even make himself win, he didn't even place. So why did you like?
Well, he didn't know what he was going against when he was doing that.
I guess.
He didn't know he was going to win.
Why did you cheat?
Yeah,
and
I don't know.
Still fail. And they were actually able to go back because they keep all the data from previous tournaments, and they've seen where he's actually cheated in multiple other tournaments.
Yeah.
They went back and looked at some and said, hey, this was the same fish also. And when they called him, they said, hey, we see same fish in these tournaments too. And he admitted to all of it. So
now he's probably, is he banned?
He's DQ'd from that tournament, and he can no longer fish any of my local club's tournaments.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Hope it was worth it, bud. Right?
Yeah.
I
mean, it's crazy.
It is. It's I don't know. I could really get on my soapbox about that, but I don't understand people that do stuff like that. I just don't. I mean, you're stealing opportunities from other people for what? For a plastic trophy, or for, like you said, a few $100. That's it. And you can't brag about it with any integrity because you cheated, right?
Agreed.
Anyway, we don't want to lambast that dude too much. At least he owned up to it and confessed. And hopefully he'll do better going forward. Right.
Yep.
One of the big things in all bass fishing now is this forward facing sonar debate and debacle this going on, and how it has completely changed professional bass fishermen, where it takes a lot less skill in angling and a lot more skill in reading technology in order to catch more fish. And it's a really hotly debated topic in professional bass fishing. Some circuits have banned it, some have embraced it. Is it a thing in the kayak world, the forward facing?
Yeah, it definitely is. And for me, I have mixed feelings on it. I'm never going to take the time to learn it. Now, I say that. I can't say never, because there may be a day that I say, hey, this is something I want to learn. But as of right now, I have no desire to learn it because of the time it takes to learn it. I know people that fish it, and they say, look, sometimes I get more discouraged than what I am happy with it, because I can see fish following my lure every time I throw it out there and can't get them to bite. You still got to be able to make that fish bite. Now, does it make it somewhat easier when you can thump them on the head with the lure and know, hey, there's a fish right there? Without a doubt. But still, you got to learn that technology, and it's not something I have any desire to learn. For the first 3 years of being in a kayak, I never even had any kind of depth finder on my kayak at all. My wife actually bought me one last Father's Day. It's just a little 4-inch unit. And I ran it some last year, and then I haven't put it on the new kayak yet, because I just haven't went through and completely outfitted the new kayak. I'm also a firm believer on, when you get a new kayak, don't just throw everything in the boat. Go out, spend some time on the water with it before you make any adjustments to it. Because you might think, well, hey, I'm going to want this. And then next thing you know, it's in your way at all times.
Yep. I think that's a good word for anybody in any outdoor type of thing, right? You need to get to know your equipment inside and out.
Yes.
Yeah. Because, you see people with just, they're basically messing stuff up for themselves, because they, you got to know your stuff before you can change it anyways. So no, I think that's a good word. I think it's a good word.
But you see that in other, just like John said, in other arenas, if I may digress a little bit here, the whole saddle hunting fad, and they've gone, and now you got the people who are one step only, and they got this rope ladder that comes way down. And so is it really one step if you got rope ladder on it? I mean, I count 4 steps on the ladder, or the aider, they call it. It's still a ladder. You can whatever you want to. It's still a ladder, right? And you see it with just so many different areas of the hunting, fishing world, where there's, who's this dude I saw the other day watching a bass fishing tournament, and he had 24-inch screens.
Yeah, it's crazy.
On the boat. I mean, it's a TV. I mean, how is that in your way? How is that not in your way?
Well, if you're not catching anything, you can play your PlayStation.
That's what it is.
I guess so.
Right. Yeah. It reminds me of the story of the guy who said he was in a hunting club, and he said, I'm paying $2,000 to not kill deer.
Yeah.
I can go to public land for free and not kill deer. Right. Yeah. So it's kind of the same. Same. But Chase, it's very fascinating, the whole kayak fishing thing for me. I got some buddies who are just really into it. I've never gotten into it. I've never had the proper equipment to do it. Having said that, and everybody knows who listens to the show now that I got a blown out shoulder, so I can't having surgery in a couple of weeks on it. But the pedal kayak is something that I may be interested in, because when I've done the farm pond kayaks and I cast, and then the wind starts blowing me, and I'm reeling like this because the wind's blowing me all the way around. Because I throw over here and the wind blows me this way, and I'm reeling. I'm just trying to get my lure in. I may turn back around, cast again, and here goes the wind again. That is really frustrating to me. It really is.
I've been there.
Yeah.
Now
but with the rudder and the pedals, I can see how it'd be a completely different.
Now, what's
a rudder is such a big upgrade.
Yeah. Now, what's the like the price jump? Let's say between a traditional, I have an open kayak. My sons do as well, and my older of the two sons has been talking about a pedal kayak or something because he's really into kayak fishing, right? So what are we looking at, like, as far as a traditional open versus a rudder versus a pedal?
So a sit in versus a sit on versus a pedal versus, what are we talking about?
Yeah. What, price wise, I mean, what's
so for, and I don't have a lot of details on sit in. I mean, you can find cheap sit ins for, a couple $100. You can find cheap sit ons for, $300 to $500 that are decent kayaks. You can actually get rudders off of Amazon and add a rudder to a lot of different kayaks as well. Sometimes it's gonna require a little bit of manual work to add, your steering system into the kayak, whether you do that foot pedal wise or put a hand controlled rudder on there. But you can add rudders too for fairly cost efficient. When you're looking at pedal drive kayaks, you can find some cheap ones that are in the $1,200 to $1,500 range. Most of the pedal kayaks, you're going to look at $2,000 plus. Big thing that I'll say, marketplace. That's where I actually got mine from. Picked up my kayak, my wife's kayak, and a trailer, all from the same person on marketplace. And for what I would have paid for the trailer and one kayak, I got both kayaks at less money.
Yeah. What's the length of your kayak?
So mine is a 12 foot. So mine is a Bonafide P127. And normally if they have numbers in the name, that's going to be the length of your foot. So it's 12 foot, or the length of your kayak. So it's 12 foot, 7 inches.
Okay.
My former kayak was a Vibe Seaghost 110. So it's an 11 foot kayak. My wife's is a PDL 106. So it's a 10 foot, 6 inch kayak.
Okay. Makes sense.
All right. Is there a size?
For me, I'm 6'2".
Better than longer, or better than shorter, or what's the deal on that?
So longer are definitely better for tracking purposes. It's easier to keep a longer kayak going straight. You get a shorter kayak and they're more apt to spin in the wind. I'm 6'2", so I needed that longer kayak, especially for a pedal drive, because my legs have to get into those pedals and not be cramped for space. So I wanted to get one that was 12 foot long when I was looking at kayaks, versus my wife, who's 5'3". She needed that smaller 10 foot kayak, because if not, her legs wouldn't even reach the pedals.
Yeah, she wouldn't be able to reach the pedal because it's a fixed location, right?
Correct. Now your seat is adjustable. So the pedals are in a fixed location, but your seat is adjustable on both kayaks. But there's also only so much adjustment.
Right. And you got the rod holders behind you, right? Where the rods stick up at an angle behind you, so you can carry multiple rods. And your tackle box is behind you, and that was an issue that I had. Is my tackle box is behind me, and of course I'm an old guy and I'm not flexible, so I got to turn around, find my tackle trays, bring them back around. But that's just part of it, right? That's just part of it.
It is, and you get used to it. So I'll say, my first few times in a kayak, like I said, I'd always said, well, why would I want to be in a little plastic boat? My first few times in a kayak, I was like, oh, these are so unstable. You move around a little bit and they sit there and wobble on you, and you're like, oh, I'm going to end up falling in the water. And the more time you spend in them, the more confident you get, the more you understand that, hey, this is something that I can make movements like this. And although I'll move, I'm not falling in the water for it. My Vibe, I won't say it's, top of the line for stability. It's not a real wide kayak. They're more streamlined. They paddle really well. They're a pretty fast paddling boat. I actually took it on a river last year and fished the Current River in Missouri. and it handled the river really, really well. But it's not one that I could just stand up in. I couldn't stand up and fish. Now I could stand in it, but it was going to be stand for a few moments and sit back down. So our tournaments are generally 8 hours. So in an 8-hour tournament, you're going to want to stand up a few times and stretch the back. Even if it has a good seat, you're going to want to stretch your back.
Yeah.
So I would stand up a couple times, but I couldn't just stay standing. And again, I have a video where I was standing in the kayak and trying to do some sight fishing, and I just got a little bit unstable, went to try to catch my balance and flipped it over. I was in like probably 4 feet of water, but it was straight mud underneath. So I ended up sucking my shoes off of me down in that mud and lost my shoes. And we were camping. So I came back to the campsite. I was the only one on the water at the time. I came back to the campsite and I had one shoe. I'm soaking wet. My wife said, "What happened to you?" I don't even want to talk about
it. On the water. I mean, it was a good day on the water. Yeah.
Oh man. What's your what do you use to you say you video your fishing? So what tools are you using to do that for those interested?
Yeah, so I use a GoPro. Again, my wife, I talked to her about it. I talked to her about it a few years ago, and I said, "Hey, I was like, I really like watching kayak fishing on YouTube. I would kind of like to do it." And I was like, "There's no way I'm going to have any success in this, but it would be fun to do. Fun to record my trips." I like to get the kids out on the water with me too. So it's fun getting them on film, and, they can always go back one day, or even my grandkids can go back and watch videos of me out there fishing and see, hey, this is what I did. So my wife picked me up a GoPro 8. So that's like, I think the 14 may be out now. So it's like 6 generations ago, but she picked me up a GoPro 8, and I used that for a little over a year before I ended up having it while I was on the Current River last year. I had it expand a battery in it. It overheated and the battery expanded in it and ended up damaging the GoPro, and I had to replace it. So last year I added a GoPro 10, and then my wife started fishing with me, so I added a GoPro 11 also.
Use the chest harness or the head?
I generally use a chest harness. So if it's just me, I'll have a chest harness, and then I'll have one camera that's behind me. I have a mount that holds my camera. It runs on the tracks.
Okay.
My kayak has tracks on it.
Yeah.
So then I'll have one camera that runs behind me. When me and my wife are out, I normally just run the chest mount, and then I'll have a track mounted behind her.
Okay. All right. Chase, I think this may be a good time to transition into the other part of our show that we do, which is our faith story. And the way I describe it to people is, just tell us your whole faith journey. Did you grow up in church? How does that impact you now? So if you don't mind, let's just go ahead and transition to that now.
Yeah. So, my grandfather was a pastor. I grew up not knowing anything but going to church. I mean, to me, it was just something that you did. There was never an option. If I signed up for any extracurricular activities and there were, trainings on nights at church, I didn't go. And anybody who was a part of that knew I wouldn't be, because church was number one. We had Thursday services, so we would go to a Thursday evening service, and then we would have Sunday morning, Sunday night. I was at every service. If there was a revival where we went, 7 nights in a row, I wasn't missing a service unless I was on my deathbed. There was no option. So I was going to be there. My grandfather is a man that I respect to this day. So he passed away 17 years ago. So lots of fond memories of him. I'll say that I would not be living the life that I live if it wasn't for that man.
Okay.
And my parents, they were always going to have me at church growing up. There was never, like I said, never the option to go the opposite way. My mom played the piano My dad played the bass. My dad could sit down at almost any instrument and kind of mess around with it, though. He could play the piano. He could play the acoustic or electric guitar.
Yeah.
He's just one of those that if he sits down on it, he can make noise and make it sound good. He learned the organ. Like I said, my grandfather was my pastor. That was my dad's father. Okay. And when they first started the church, it was a very small church, and they didn't have any instruments. So they got an organ and a bass guitar. My dad learned the bass and my aunt learned the organ. They were twins. And then they got tired of playing the same instrument every service, so they swapped instruments. So my aunt learned the bass and my dad learned the organ, and they would swap instruments, just to have music. So yeah, so I grew up going to church. It was always important to be at church, even at a time when I wasn't serving the Lord. I was at church, because there was no option to not go. I grew up and kind of strayed away from God a little, and never had that real living it for myself. I was going to be there because out of respect to grandpa, out of respect to my parents, I was going to be there. I was kind of rough around the edges. I had a temper growing up, and there was a time that I was like, man, I'm supposed to be a Christian, and I'm fighting, and like I said, rough around the edges. And people who know my grandpa's name, if they see me, they're going to be like, that's one of Floyd's grandkids. That's an odd thing, for him to act this way. My grandpa is one of those that when he did pass away, I mean, he had everybody in the community came to his funeral. People that we had no clue knew him, were there at his funeral, and they all had great things to say. So I was like, I can't be his grandson and live the life the way I live it, So that was when I decided I really had to make a change for myself. I started really getting in and seeking the Lord myself more thoroughly, and got a real walk with God that was my own. Then, a few years later, I met my wife. We married. My grandpa had already passed away at that point. And my wife and I, we've been married almost 15 years. It'll be 15 years. I say almost. It'll be 15 years in October. So
14 and a half years.
Yeah, 14 and a half. Exactly. So we've been together for over 14 years, and can't say that I haven't ever strayed throughout that time, but like I said, we have 4 kids. So it is very, very important for me to raise my kids the way I was raised, to show them the right way. And my kids, we had babies back to back to back. So we had a baby 14 months later. We had our son first. 14 months later, we had our first daughter. 10 months later, we had our second daughter.
Wow.
And then
you know causes that, right? Okay.
Yeah, we figured it out after that.
Yeah.
It was 4 years later before we had our youngest.
Wow.
So our kids now are 12, 11, 10, and 7.
Okay. So is your wife?
What was that?
Is your wife's name Xerox?
I
mean, that's very prolific. Good for her.
10 months.
It was hard. It was hard.
Yeah.
It was very, very unexpected. Our first baby was a good baby. So it was like, well, if we have another baby, it's not that big of a deal, right?
Yeah, you thought you had to figure it out.
Our second baby was different. She was not as easy as that first one.
Yeah.
And so we were like, oh, we cannot have another baby anytime soon. And she went in for a checkup, and they said, you're pregnant.
Surprise.
So you had 3 in diapers at the same time?
Yes, had 3 in diapers at the same time. Our girls are the same age for 2 months out of the year. So
yeah, I had 3 in diapers at the same time as well. And I think you're going to hit a mother load of money when you stop buying diapers, but you don't, because now they're into something else.
And then the food starts going up. which is crazy. My 7-year-old, he eats more than what my older kids do. He's like, he's already at that like teenage boy phase. He already eats like a teenage boy does.
John and I can tell you, nothing eats like a teenage boy. It's like unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable how much they put food away. You just wait until they get to 13, 14,
Yeah.
15.
Yeah,
I can remember my youngest son. He would get up from eating a full supper, 2 pieces of cube steak, mashed potatoes. Well, he didn't eat mashed potatoes, but butter beans, black-eyed peas, cornbread, and get up and go make 2 sandwiches. I'm like, good God, how in the world? Where are you putting all this?
Yeah.
You just wait.
Yeah.
I can go ahead.
Yeah, my 16-year-old he's a never-ending pit. He'll come home, he'll go out with friends. I'll be like, "What'd you have?" "Oh, we stopped at McDonald's. I got a Big Mac meal and 20-piece McNuggets." They're like, "What?" And then he'll go right to the fridge. I'm like, "Come on."
I can remember on Sundays we would always go to a place. It was called Maverick. It's kind of like a spinoff of Ponderosa. I don't know if you guys have those around you, but it's a steakhouse that has a buffet, and we would go there, and I would eat the buffet, and I got to the point of ordering a steak. I would order a steak, and it was like an 8-ounce sirloin. And I would eat mine, and I would look over at my mom's plate, and I'd be like, "Are you going to eat your steak?" I could remember eating her steak, and then we would get home after church after eating that, and I'd be like, "Oh, I'm hungry. I got to go get a sandwich." So I remember those days myself.
That's when the second job comes in to feed the son.
That's why you got to keep more of those fish.
Yeah, no joke.
Quit throwing them back.
That's right.
Man, sadly, me and my youngest are the only 2 that really like to eat fish.
Okay.
One of my daughters will eat it. She's not a big fan of it, but she'll eat fish. Yeah. I love fish, and my youngest loves fish. He always calls it fish chicken nuggets. So
yeah,
nice.
I don't care what kind. And to me, that's the great thing about fish. Every species tastes different.
Yes, it does.
So I eat fish every day, and eat bass today and crappie tomorrow and catfish the next day, and then salmon or whatever. It's all fish tastes different, and that's one of the things I like about it. You can cook it the same way, but a different species tastes very different.
Yes,
but
they
nothing
do.
beats walleye. I'm a southern dude, so we don't have walleye here. But I have been fortunate enough to fish in Canada where they have walleye, and I'm there's nothing beats walleye nuggets. I'm just gonna say it is the best tasting fish.
I'm frying some up this week.
Oh, so is it okay to say on this podcast I'm envious of you for going up to Canada and fishing?
Yeah, it's okay to say that.
I still have some walleye from Lake Erie in the freezer, so I gotta.
Nice.
We'll be having them this week. So
nice.
I'll be thinking of you, Pete. I'll be thinking of
you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
I'll say my favorite fish is flathead catfish.
Really?
I think it's pretty hard to beat.
It is.
How do you prepare it?
So chunk it up, fry it in chunks, probably about like 1 inch by 1 inch, so something like that.
Yeah, fish nuggets. That's the way I do walleye.
Oh yeah, it's the best way. Especially, you can get a 50-pound flathead, and you clean out that yellow meat, and it'll be pure white when you fry it up. Oh, good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to clean out the yellow meat.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the same
all
way.
The yellow meat goes.
Yeah, and like stripers or perch or white bass, they all have a red vein in it. You got to cut that red vein out, and then it's really, really good. Really good.
Just get that pure white flaky meat.
Yeah. We got off of the faith story and got on to how to cook fish here. So let's get back to God.
Digressing a little bit here.
Yeah. So like I said, my goal for the last, since having children is to make sure that I raise my kids in church. That is a big focus for me. We've been going to the church that we go to now for 2 years. It's about a 40-minute drive for us, but it's the church that just fits our family. It's perfect. I grew up in a small church, and that's all I've known most of my life. We actually, when we decided it was time to find a church that fit us, we started looking at a few different churches, and we went to one that I really enjoyed. I already knew the pastor. We had a good relationship and really enjoyed that church, but we went to this one just to say, hey, we've eliminated every church. We know that we're following God's will. We know we're going to the right church. And we pulled into this one, and it's a big church. And before we even walked in, I was like, I'm glad that we're going here, but there is no way. There is no way. And we actually went on New Year's Day. It was New Year's Day 2 years ago. And when we walked in, I had already been like really praying about growing my prayer life. That was one of the things I was like, I really want to work on growing my prayer life. That's what I need to focus on this year. I was, we had been going through some stuff personally, and, we were in the process of, like I said, finding a church that really fit us. And I was like, I need to work on growing my prayer life. That New Year's service, the pastor talked about prayer. And then he said the entire month of January, every Wednesday night service was going to be a prayer service. And I was like, well, talk about God talking to you, something that I'm already saying I need to work on, and then walk into this service. And that's what the topic is. We left the service, and I had already thought, man, this is the right thing. And I could see it on my wife's face too. We were both feeling it, but we were like, well, we're going to go back to this other church one more time. And while we were at that other church, it was a great service, but we couldn't help but think, what are we missing at the other service right now? And we've not went anywhere else since. We were very blessed. We've got an awesome pastor.
You can give a shout out.
Great family in the church.
You can give a shout out.
My church is a Abundant Faith Church in Evansville, Indiana. And my pastor is James Maroney. Love him and his whole family. He has two twin boys and a wife. They're amazing. Very blessed to be a part of this church.
Is this a non-denominational church?
It's a UPC, United Pentecostal.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. We don't have many of the we have a lot of Pentecostal holiness here, but don't have many UPCs. Right. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that one. Just because I mean, like I said, here in the South Carolina, there's not many that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
That denomination. So that's cool. It's nice when you find a church that fits you.
Yes.
Right. It really is. And I just moved to where I'm living now back in June, and I've been to church shopping, and I said, I've been driving by this particular church to try these other ones. I'm going to stop here. It's Lugoff First Baptist. And like you said, as soon as I walked in, I was like, this is a good church. This is a good church. Good. And it just good biblical preaching, great music. Yeah. Everybody's welcoming. This is a very small town. So a 200 member church is a large church, right?
Huge,
and or attendance. I mean, Lugoff is a very small town. But it's nice to hear, because I've said this a lot when I go speak at events, is that I use this analogy. If you go to Outback and they make you a bad steak, do you stop eating steak? No, right? So if you go to this church and it doesn't fit you, doesn't mean you stop going to church. You go find another one, or you go back. Maybe the preacher can't hit a home run every week, right? Yeah. Sometimes he gets a bunt single, but it may not be for you that week. But you go back. You don't give up on church because this church didn't fit you, or because they burned your steak, right? You continue to go.
If you expect to go to a church and the people to be perfect, I mean, you're just wrong in your expectations. It's just not going to be that way. It's like you said, wherever you go, I mean, I go to work and work's hurt me before, that doesn't mean that I stopped going to work. Now, I mean, I wish I could sometimes,
right.
But I still go back there, and I mean, church hurt is going to happen, but it's where you got to realize that the people going there are still people,
right. Well,
people make mistakes.
Yeah. Well, and you said you're not going to find the perfect church, but reality is, if you find the perfect church, you probably shouldn't go there anyways, because you're going to mess it up. Right. So, right. Because, we have to remember, you know, it's amazing how pride filled we are some days, right? You know, we walk in, these people. Well,
holier than now.
These are the people Jesus came for, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, including me. It's a miracle they're saved. It's a miracle I am. So praise Jesus.
Yeah. I had a conversation. I want to jump on this for a minute because I think it's important that it came up because that means God's telling us to talk about it a little bit. Is I had a conversation a few months ago with actually a family member, and they were saying that, well, I just don't go to church because I'm sitting there looking and so-and-so's looking at their watch and I know what this person does. I said, well, why aren't you paying attention to what the preacher says? Why are you looking at what this person's doing? Why are you looking at that guy who's watching his watch? He may have cows he has to go milk in a hurry, you know, or somebody buzzed him and said, you got cows out in the pasture because it's a very rural area, you know, or you don't know what's going on in his life.
Yep.
Right. So I think it needs to be more about why am I here? How can this bless me? How can I, instead of just always trying to, in my opinion, those people are looking for a reason not to go.
Yeah.
And justify their actions.
Well, and I would jump onto what you said and what Chase said back a few moments ago, that he showed up going, Lord, I need to do more with my prayer life, right? And God gave him what he needed. And I think there's something to be said of when you show up to church looking for God, versus looking at others.
Yes.
That's going to be a completely different experience, because truth is the preacher can do a bunt single that week and you can still get closer to Jesus.
Absolutely.
You know, if you are looking for an encounter with God, he rarely disappoints. And I think that's the problem, is that a lot of times we don't, you know, we set the table with nice china and nice silverware when guests come to the house. And sometimes we show up to the house of God and we never set the table. Shame on us, right? I mean,
all too often.
Yeah.
I like that example, John. That's good. Because I go to some people's houses and it's paper plates and plastic forks. My sister specifically, if you're listening to this theory, because she's like, I hate washing dishes. So that's the reason you get. I can get away with it with my brother. So okay, all right, that's fine. Chase, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you reaching out to us and saying, hey, I think I got a good story I'd like to share, and you did, and I really appreciate it very much. So. Tell people how they can find your YouTube channel and your social media or any other thing that you have going on, so in case they want to follow you.
Yeah, so I'm on all the social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
What's the name?
YouTube.
Tell them how to find you.
Big focus: Southwest Indiana Outdoors.
Okay, all right.
Southwest Indiana Outdoors, and it's the same on all the platforms.
Awesome.
I have a lot of fun doing it. So
good. Thank you for joining us here on Christian Outdoors Podcast. I appreciate it. John, you got any closing word?
No, again, thank you so much. I'm I have, like I said, I have a son who's really interested in the kayak fishing, so I'm gonna push him towards your channel and to this episode as well. So
and if he ever wants to reach out, send me a message on Messenger on my page, because I respond all the time. I've helped a lot of people.
So. Sure thing. Appreciate it. Thank you, Chase.
Yep.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yes, sir.
God bless.
With Southwest Indiana Outdoors. Thanks for joining us, buddy.